Shadows in the Sweet Shop. In the heart of the quaint town of Willowbrook stood a charming little sweet shop, its windows adorned with colorful confections that seemed to beckon to passersby. Detective Emma Hayes found herself there one chilly autumn evening, drawn by both the promise of sugary delights and a new case that had her intrigued. As Emma entered the shop, the scent of warm caramel and freshly baked pastries enveloped her. The bell above the door tinkled, announcing her arrival to the elderly owner, Mrs. Thompson. "Good evening, Detective. How may I assist you today?" Mrs. Thompson inquired, her eyes twinkling with kindness. "I'm here on official business, Mrs. Thompson. We received a tip about a possible crime nearby. I'd like to ask you a few questions." Emma replied, her gaze sweeping over the shelves of delectable treats. Mrs. Thompson's warm smile faded as she listened to Emma's inquiries about the recent activities in the area. She mentioned that there had been some strange occurrences lately, with a mysterious figure loitering near the shop after hours. Emma thanked Mrs. Thompson for her cooperation and decided to stake out the sweet shop that night. As darkness settled in, she watched from a hidden vantage point, her senses on high alert. Hours passed in stillness, broken only by the distant hoots of an owl. Just as Emma was beginning to feel discouraged, she spotted a shadowy figure approaching the shop. The figure moved with purpose, its intent clear. Emma stealthily followed, her heart pounding in the silence. They led her through narrow alleys and quiet streets until they reached the edge of town, where a dense, foreboding forest loomed. The figure disappeared into the darkness of the trees, and Emma hesitated for a moment before plunging after them. The forest was an eerie labyrinth, its trees reaching towards the sky like skeletal fingers. As she ventured deeper, Emma's flashlight illuminated twisted roots and gnarled branches. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant call of a lone wolf. She pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. Finally, in a small clearing, she found the figure standing beside a hidden stash of stolen goods. They turned to face her, desperation in their eyes. "Please, Detective, you have to understand," the figure pleaded. It was a young man, fear etched on his face. "I had no choice. They were going to hurt my family if I didn't do this." Emma's heart ached for the young man. She assured him that she would do everything in her power to protect his family legally. In the end, justice was served. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that sometimes the line between right and wrong blurred in the face of desperate circumstances. As she left the dark forest behind, Emma knew that this case would stay with her, a reminder that in the shadows, there were often stories of survival, sacrifice, and the lengths one would go to protect the ones they loved. Shadows on the shoreline. The construction site loomed tall and imposing against the city skyline, its steel girders reaching for the heavens. Detective Liam Reynolds stood amidst the cacophony of drills and hammering, a tip leading him to this towering puzzle of concrete and metal. He had received word of a possible crime linked to the construction site, and as he surveyed the area, he couldn't help but wonder what secrets this place held. Liam approached the site manager, Mr. Martinez, who greeted him with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Detective Reynolds, what brings you here?" "I'm here on official business, Mr. Martinez," Liam replied, his gaze sweeping over the maze of scaffolding and half-finished structures. "I need to ask you some questions regarding recent activities around this area." Mr. Martinez's brow furrowed as he recounted the odd occurrences. There had been reports of missing equipment and mysterious figures lurking at night. Liam thanked him for his cooperation and decided to keep a vigilant eye on the site after dusk. As night fell, the construction site transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and echoes. Liam concealed himself in a strategic vantage point, the sounds of the city fading into the background. Hours passed, the only sounds being the distant hum of traffic and the occasional rustling of leaves. Just as Liam was beginning to doubt his instincts, he spotted movement near the edge of the site. Silently, he followed the figure, moving through the skeletal structure of what would soon be a towering skyscraper. They led him to the outskirts of the city, where the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore began to permeate the air. They arrived at a serene, moonlit beach, the waves casting silvery reflections on the sand. The figure stopped, their silhouette framed against the tranquil expanse of the sea. Liam approached cautiously, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. The figure turned, their face illuminated by the moonlight. It was a woman, her eyes weary but determined. "Detective, you need to listen," she implored. I had no choice. My family's safety was at stake. Liam studied her, empathy in his gaze. He knew that desperate circumstances could lead people to make difficult decisions. He assured her that he would do everything in his power to protect her family within the bounds of the law. In the end, justice was served. But Liam couldn't shake the feeling that sometimes the line between right and wrong blurred in the face of adversity. As he stood on the tranquil beach, gazing out at the endless expanse of the ocean, Liam knew that this case would stay with him. A reminder that even in the midst of chaos, there were stories of survival, sacrifice, and the lengths one would go to protect their loved ones. Shadows in the produce aisle. Detective Maya Rodriguez stood at the entrance of the bustling neighborhood market, the scent of fresh produce and the murmur of shoppers filling the air. She had received a tip about a possible crime linked to this humble corner store, and now she was determined to get to the bottom of it. As Maya entered, she was greeted by the friendly smile of Mr. Patel, the owner of the market. Good day, detective. How can I help you today? I'm here on official business, Mr. Patel, Maya replied, her gaze sweeping over the colorful array of fruits and vegetables. I'd like to ask you a few questions about recent activities around here. Mr. Patel's expression turned serious as he recounted the peculiar incidents. There had been reports of missing inventory and strange occurrences after closing time. Maya thanked him for his cooperation and decided to conduct a discreet surveillance of the market. After hours, late that night, Maya took her position among the shelves, the soft hum of the refrigerator units providing a rhythmic backdrop. She watched and waited, her senses on high alert. Hours passed, the silence broken only by the occasional creaking of the floorboards. Just as Maya was beginning to grow restless, she spotted movement near the back of the store. She moved with calculated precision, shadowing the figure as they navigated through the aisles. They eventually led her to a narrow alley, where the city's distant lights were replaced by the cool glow of the moon. The figure turned, their face partially obscured by the dim light. It was a man, his eyes weary but determined. Please, detective, you have to understand, he implored. I had no choice. My daughter, she's sick, and I couldn't afford the medicine. Maya studied him, compassion in her gaze. She knew that desperation could lead people to make drastic decisions. She assured him that they would find a legal way to get his daughter the help she needed. In the end, justice was served. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that sometimes the line between right and wrong blurred in the face of desperation. As she stood amidst the crates of fresh produce in Mr. Patel's market, Maya knew that this case would stay with her. It was a reminder that even in the midst of adversity, there were stories of survival, sacrifice, and the lengths one would go to protect their loved ones.